basically when you order the HuMa regulator, it comes in 2 pieces, and this bit will screw into here, which I'll cover in a minute, but that would screw into there, and then this bit slides into the air cylinder or pressure tube, whatever you want to call it. And as you can see, it takes up a lot less volume. It's well, it looks like even it's half the volume that the standard regulator takes up, which means you're going to get quite a substantial increase in cylinder volume, which will give you a good number of extra shots per fill. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with this regulator. It's a great regulator. It regulates as a regulator should. It's just huge. So this is obviously going to save a bit of air. And I will also point out that this is a sub 12 foot-pound model. It's not an FAC model. The FAC model has a larger Flenham or bus or standoff, goes by many names, and basically it'll be a bit longer. So I think off the top of my head it's about that long, which is still a massive saving over the standard Leshiy regulator. So there we go. That's the HuMa regulator and the standoff. I'll get this stock out the way. Now we're going to remove the standard regulator, which is basically just a case of unscrewing it. And there we go. That's the standard regulator out the way. That's the firing valve spring. It's quite a chunky spring. And then that's the firing valve or knock-off valve or exhaust valve, goes by many names. In the kit that comes with the HuMa regulator, there are a couple of springs. We're going to replace this massive spring with a short spring because obviously we don't have a long Flenham like we do with the HuMa regulator, so we need a shorter spring. So one's supplied in the kit. So we'll take the chunky spring off, put the shorter spring on, and then I'll show you what will happen. Fit that in. That is spring loaded, so you have to keep a bit of pressure on it while you get it engaged. And basically you can see the standard firing valve sticks out the back of the regulator by a mile. Obviously that's not going to work because the regulator needs to butt up against this face, and it can't do that because the firing valve's in the way. So we're going to have to trim this. It's not difficult. It's necessary. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But once it's trimmed, we'll be able to pop this up all the way up to there, as it should be, without bumping into the firing valve. So basically, I'll actually, while this is together, you can mark where this face is in relation to this, and just remember the spring's in there. So the spring is holding the firing valve in the closed position, which is basically where we want it. There's a couple of things you can do here. You can either use a pencil or a marker or some sort of marking device, to mark where it is. Basically all I'm doing is marking around flush with the this aluminium body, and that's telling me where the end is. The alternative is you could use something like a Stanley blade to score a line in it, or a scalpel or whatever, basically, as long as you can see what you've done. And then I'm going to unscrew this again. Remember, it's spring loaded, so just keep your hand on it because you don't want it shooting off. Pull the spring off, and there we go. You can see where I've marked that. And now this next bit you need to be careful of, because basically what you want is the this end needs to be cut a little bit back from this. So basically, if you've marked that flush with that, we're going to want to trim this a tiny bit more on the valve side, just to give it a bit of room, because obviously when the hammer hits this, it's going to move backwards, which means it's going to poke out. It's going to knock back when the hammer hits it. So we need to allow for that. It doesn't shoot back much, but we do need to allow for it. Otherwise, what will happen is if you cut it off exactly on the mark, when it tries to open, it'll probably hit the back of the regulator before it's opened enough, and then you'll be wondering why you can't get your power up, and it's because you've cut that too long and it's hitting the regulator rather than being able to open enough to let the air out. So that said, we need to allow a little, basically, it's going to be tricky to show on the camera, but basically we want this to, it needs to be engaged in the hole, so it needs to be supported by the hole in this cap, but it doesn't want to be flush there. We need it to be in a bit, and I'm going to say about, I mean, it's a little bit more than 1 millimeter, I would say, inside of the this face. So I'm going to cut this roughly 1 millimeter shorter than where my mark is, and then just double check it. There's a number of ways you can cut this. You could cut it with a pair of side cutters, but that'll obviously give you a sort of a sharper edge. You could cut it with a Stanley knife. You could cut it with something like a junior hacksaw. If you've got a lathe, you can part it off in the lathe. There's loads of different options for trimming this. Basically, all you need is it to be trimmed. So you know, you could use a bread knife if you don't have anything better for the job. As long as it trims it, it's just plastic. It's not going to be too tricky to cut.